He goes, sometimes you just gotta be there and just ask questions like, are you okay?
Yep.
It's like, because they have nobody to really.
Yep.
He goes, it's a struggle for all pastors.
It's true. Yep.
I struggle every day with it.
Yeah, and it's a very, to our online friends, we had a technical issue, so we're back on talking about battling the holiday blues. And the holiday season often magnifies feelings of loss, somebody that no longer has a spouse with them for whatever reason, or a family member, or maybe it's illness, or low self-worth, or anxiety about something, or feeling they have lack of at this time. That's that's a lot of people. And about 8% of the adults in our country have experienced a major depression, with women being affected more than men. And I thought that was very interesting. But if you stop and think about it, we as women, we do run more emotionally. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense to me. And that was a Google stat. Just Google it in like stats, so it'll come up. And 18 to 25 years old, this made me sad, being the age group with the highest prevalence of depression. But I think as time goes on and society gets further away from God, that these kids are growing up into young adults and do not know how to function. They do not know how to handle life because nobody's preparing them for it. I feel like I was better prepared for life than the kids growing up now, for the most part. Leo, will you turn that off? That must be on. So, and then also it said 45 to 64 will often experience it as well. And I feel like a lot of times as people get towards the end of their life, they look and people are gone, or they don't have a lot, and they're struggling just to make ends meet, and some of that can lead into that too. So are you someone who battles the holiday blues or depression at any time? If you are, take heart, because we are only human. And I was thinking about this, and some people, hear that about my husband. I'm like, what? It's reality. And most people at some time will go through it at some time. And I feel like there are examples in God's Word of people who experienced some sort of depression at some time. So the first one that comes to my mind is King David. Before he wrote Psalm 51, which was a plea for forgiveness for some of the things he'd done, I feel like up to that point, he probably experienced some great depression before he was ready to just have a clean heart, create in me a clean heart, Lord, just take all this away. He probably had some pretty low points, and I feel like Naomi, with Ruth and Naomi, Naomi said, call me Mara, which means bitter, and we had a lesson about her, a little bit different take on a lesson about Naomi. But one thing I will say about, and I'll say it next. So Elijah's another example. He was a prophet, and then also King Saul. King Saul was like bipolar or something. He had a lot going on, and so he was one that I'm pretty sure experienced depression as well. But what we need to realize about depression is that it causes us to focus inwardly. Okay? And it causes us to focus on us, on our circumstances, on our situations, or lack of things. And as Christians, we need to understand that the battleground, that our heart, which is the place of our thoughts, when you say to somebody, oh man, that cut me to the heart, or you're thinking about Mary pondered all these things in her heart, we're talking about our thought life. And for the Christian, that's the battleground. If we could just get hold of that our thought life, our heart, is the battleground of our whole Christian life, then it would be life-changing. We say, yeah, I know that, our thought life isn't important. Our thought life is almost everything, that just will change our whole world and how we live. So let's go to Proverbs 4:23. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Who would like to read that?
Proverbs 4:23. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life.
This is why God tells us to keep our hearts, because according to this verse, we're to keep, which when I look that up, it means to maintain, protect, watch over our heart, which is our thoughts, because they determine our life decision. And we've talked about this before. Eye gate, ear gate, hand, those affect all of our decisions, what we put into these gates. They form who we are. Okay, if I'm filling myself up with junk, I can tell when I'm watching too much TV, whether it's good TV or not. I can tell. I can tell when I'm reading a lot of my Bible. And what's interesting to me is my husband can tell when one of those is going on, or if I'm not in my Bible enough, and I can tell with him. You just kind of, especially with your spouse, you kind of get to know each other so well. But just stop and think about your own self. I know when I'm getting too much of something else, or I'm really immersing myself in the Word, because it shows in the decisions that I make. And it's very important that we maintain, protect, watch over our thoughts, because that's gonna determine what kind of decisions I make from day to day. And the decisions that I make from day to day determine what kind of person I'm gonna be and what kind of life I'm gonna live. If my thought life is full of this, then I'm gonna make decisions that are led by God. And that's gonna show in my life. On the same hand, the other hand, if I am not full of the Word, and I'm full of TV, books, peers, friends, family members, and I'm full of that, that's gonna be in my thoughts, and it's gonna form my decisions, and that's who I'm gonna become. And it's not gonna point to Christ. That's gonna show in my life. As Pastor would tell you, he can sit back and watch decisions being made, and sometimes it just breaks our heart, because it's like, why are you making these decisions? But we know, because if we're full of this, that's going to show in our decision-making process. And if we're not, that's going to show as well. So in order to not focus inwardly on me, we must focus outwardly and upwardly on Christ alone. Okay, remember, depression it centers around me. Okay, so that's an inward thing. And 2 Corinthians, let's turn there. I always like to turn that verses on there, but 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. Says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. This verse means that we choose. Okay, again, our life is full of choices. The Christian life is full of choices. We either choose to live for Christ, or we choose not to. And it's a collection of our choices. We choose to focus inwardly, or we choose to focus outwardly and upwardly. Okay? Those are choices. Whether we make them consciously or not, they're choices. And we've said this many times before in our class, the Christian life is a purposeful life. Okay, I can't just live my life and expect it to come out as a Christian life. It's not going to. Why? Because I'm flesh, and because I'm human. And if I let the human, fleshly part of me make the decisions, then it's not gonna be a life that points to Christ. It's gonna show. It's a fleshly life that I'm living because I'm making the choice to be fleshly, to be carnal. whether I want to admit that or not. That's a hard thing to admit is, I make carnal choices. Well, every time I choose not to come to church and I could is a carnal choice. That's hard, okay? That's not a spiritual choice. And just mind you, I am never pointing at anybody. That I'm not pointing at me. I struggle with the same things that you all do. Pastor struggles with the same things that we all do. Okay? Coming to church is not always easy for me. Someone go, well, yeah, because sometimes I might have a headache. Sometimes I just may be feeling down and struggling with life, And so it's choice. And we have to make spiritual choices to be a spiritual person. So we have to, in order to make spiritual choices, I've got to be spiritual. Does that make sense? If I'm choosing consciously or unconsciously to be carnal, which means worldly, think like the world, I'm going to make carnal choices. I'm going to give into my flesh. I'm going to do what my flesh feels like doing. And that just leads to a carnal life that does not point to Christ. So this means we choose to not think on things, that verse, that are contrary to what God says. Okay, and where do we find what God says? In His Word, and also walking with Him. He'll guide and direct us. It's just amazing to me how when I'm walking close to the Lord, I just know what to do. I know, we always think of finding God's will for our life. Oh, God's hiding His will from me. No, He's not. Well, I'm trying to figure out God's will. We'll walk close to Him. If I'm walking close to Him, God's not going to hide His will from me. But it's up to me to be walking close to Him so I can hear His voice instead of having everything else in my life drown out. And I'm going, God's just not telling me what I'm supposed to be doing. No, there's so much background noise. There's so much background noise in my life from other things I'm filling up with that I cannot hear the voice of God. That's not His fault. It's up to me to choose to make spiritual decisions, to move all that stuff away and make spiritual choices. And when we bring our thoughts into captivity, and I'm a visual person, so I'm just like, I don't even know what thoughts look like, but I'm grabbing them, Again, going back to when Pastor grabbed the garlic and I hang onto his legs. But we have to bring our thoughts into captivity, which means we have to control them so that we're obeying God. When something comes up, and Satan's always throwing those darts at us, okay? Why? He can't have my soul because I'm saved, and once saved, always saved. But he can make me an ineffective Christian. But if I choose to let those darts get to me, but I want to be dodging those darts, and part of that is to control, to take into captivity our thoughts. When something comes to my mind that is not pleasing to God, then I have to control and make a conscious decision not to park there and think. Okay? Because he's going to put stuff in front of our mind, like set it right in front of me. And then I've got to decide, park here and think about this, or no, Lord, and repeat a verse. Okay? Even this one's great. This casting down imaginations, every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. It doesn't stay there. I don't stay there. Move it out of the way, and I'm moving on. And that's a decision I'm only going to be able to make if I'm walking with the Lord. And you say, well, how do I know what thoughts to park and which ones to, get away from? Well, Philippians 4:8, let's turn there. And we've gone over this verse many times before. But if you haven't committed this to memory, I'm going to encourage you to commit it to memory. Who wants to read Philippians 4:8? Go ahead, Ashley.
Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think of these things.
God just took all the guesswork out of our thought life for us. If it's not on this list and it gets put into our thoughts, get away from it. If it's not right there, right here. So that's, whatsoever things are true. If it's not true, okay? This filters out a lot if it's not honest. There's a lot of things in the world that I could focus on that aren't honest. And I'm not even going to name them. You stop and do your own thinking on this. Holiday season is one I can think of that really has some stuff that would not fall into this category of what we should think on. So whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure. Ouch. Okay? Pure, holy, without blemish, without spot. What do I put in my mind through my eye gate, ear gate, and even my, my hands, what I touch, and my feet where I walk? What am I putting into my life that is not pure? Okay, that rules out an awful lot of books, magazines, TV shows, a lot of conversation that may have with people. I mean, just stop and think about, well, don't park there and think, but just think about things that are not pure. And then I love this word, whatsoever things are lovely. Just lovely. It reminds me of a lady who takes care of herself. I think my mom is lovely, and these things here and are of good report. These are the things we're supposed to think on. And when something comes into our mind and it doesn't fall in there, and we choose to park it and think on it, we're disobeying God. And that's focusing inwardly. We can't focus outward and upward if we're focusing inwardly. And in order to focus outward and upward, we have to walk with God. I say it over and over again because it's just crucial. And we miss the fact that our thought life is where it all really takes place. If we can get control with the help of the Lord of our thought life, we will have such a victorious Christian life. And ladies, I don't have the corner on that or whatever. I struggle with it. I do. I struggle with it. But I want victory. And I know how to get victory because God tells me how to get victory. And it's by being spiritual and not being carnal, not focusing inwardly. My husband has said this, and it's a hard statement, but I'm going to make it. And he can say it because he's been through it, and he still will battle it at times. Depression is selfish. Okay? It's selfish because it focuses in on us, on how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, the circumstances in my life. It just focuses here. And as Christian ladies, we can't have the focus here. So we've got to make that decision to focus outward and upward. And doing that, it takes it off us. Bringing our thoughts into captivity means that we focus on the things that are true, that are honest, that are just and pure, lovely, and of good report. So when Satan brings those, he shoots those fiery darts at us, and those thoughts come into our mind. I always say, just even like my husband, when they're out and about, and I use men because it affects them more. If a woman, I won't say a lady, a woman walks by half dressed, and she goes right by my husband, it's not his fault that he saw that.
Yep.
But it is his fault if it's a choice if he parks there and thinks about that or does a second look. Okay? And only a spiritual man is going to be able to not do that. Okay? Because of the way they're wired. But it's a choice. It's a choice to think on the things that are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report. And when something contrary to those comes into our view, we cast it down. Think of, again, I'm just so literal with my thinking. Think of grabbing something and just chucking it down. That, to me, that's casting down. That's not brushing it aside. Like, oh, go away. No, it's grabbing it, casting down. I'm not throwing my drink. Like it came to my mind, because I say, if it comes into your view, comes into your thought, move it. No, cast it down. And we do this with the help from the Lord. It's not something we can do of our own strength. Because if we could, then everybody would have a, good thought life. But they don't. It takes the Lord to help us with that and to think on the things that are good. But we must be focused outward and upwardly and not inwardly. Because focusing inwardly, our mind is on us. And that will lead to the holiday blues and depression. Some of you, I think of my mom, and I think of you guys, have hard decisions to make. And we think, around the holiday season, really? But it's tough anytime, okay? But it does seem like the holiday season kind of brings out, doesn't it, Joanna? It kind of brings out that stuff a little bit more, like we have to deal with this. I should be thinking about the Christmas tree, the gifts under the tree, and not be thinking about the things that I'm having to think about. But it is what it is. And, my family was talking about Kylie the other day, and just that God knows. And none of it's taken God by surprise. And he loves her, and he loves my mom more than we ever could. And he knows beginning to end. And when Satan brings into your view and my view those things, my husband keeps telling me, Julie, don't borrow trouble. Do not borrow trouble. You take it as it comes and trust God. And that is definitely trusting God, is to not dwell on the things that are coming our way. But I just have to trust him. Isaiah 26:3 on the bottom says, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. And I almost just wrote Isaiah 26:3a and left it there. But then God said, no, write the rest of that, because he trusteth in thee. I have to trust in God and his plan for Kylie, and his plan for my mom, and his plan for me and each one of you. I have to trust that the creator of all, my creator, my savior, my heavenly father, that he wants what is best for me, and that he has made no mistake. He has made no mistake. The test results, they're not mistakes. They are God appointed. And I don't know if you remember the Father Filtered message, where it had God glasses. Everything comes through God when you're a child of God. Kylie's a child of God. My mom is. Tanya is. Children of God, and God has not left you. Okay? Sometimes we draw away from God, and it's this human flesh where we, the very thing we should be doing is turning to God, grabbing onto him and holding onto his feet. And our fleshly nature will turn away, just like a child that, gets hurt or something doesn't always want the comfort. I've seen some people, I just want to nurse my hurt by myself. And it'd be so much better if you would let mom or dad just, okay, come here. Once they do, they're fine. Reminds me of Weston yesterday. When he woke up, I went in there, and he looked at me and started crying. And I'm like, and then I was like, okay, shock factor. He didn't expect me to come in. I said, it's okay, it's okay. And then he broke out in the biggest grin once he got in my arms, and he was fine. We have got to go to the right source for our comfort and our strength. So as you go through these things, focusing outwardly and upwardly, and keeping our mind stayed on Christ. And that is the things that he has said in the blue, Philippians 4:8. God did not put, I challenge you, memorize this verse. He did not put it in here just so that we could say, oh yeah, and read it every once in a while. No, memorize it. Because when something else comes into our thoughts and it doesn't fit in with that, you can know that it's not of God. And so you need to cast it down. Get rid of it. Don't have it in your mind. And we will have great peace. You won't have you might battle with it, but it's not going to be the battle that you were experiencing, okay? We battle with things because we're flesh. And sometimes the look is too long, or there's a second look, or we park there for a second. But then we get, no, this is not what I'm going to do. And God gives us the strength to cast it down, okay? But I want to cast it down right away. So that's always, that's my goal. When we stop trying is when you stop growing and you move backwards. We've talked, we don't stay stationary in our Christian life. You know, just like, oh, I'm comfortable in this part of my Christianity, so I'll stay right here. It doesn't work that way. You slip further and further back. And we don't want to do that because victory is ahead, you know, and the victory is ours for the taking. God has given us the victory. He's given us the formula. I'm very bad when I cook about recipes and following recipes. I'm just like, oh, okay, you know, and I just, it does make me think of my mom when I was there and she was making something, but she was tired and the chemo was still in effect. And she was just chucking things in this thing, you know, and I was just like, oh my word, you know, and I didn't want to hurt her because she enjoys baking so much. So, you know, I think I was just trying to like, you know, you can go sit down, you know, but she wanted to do it. But then, I mean, her strength just kind of gave out and her mind was just not totally on the recipe. And the end result, you know, it was kind of a little bit rough. Sorry, Mom, if you're watching. But it was a really great example. I'm terrible about following recipes. Now, I think my sister, Laura, I'm pretty sure she's one that if that says half a teaspoon of salt, she's not eyeballing, get out the thing. And I am so the opposite. And really, my mom is kind of too. We just have always, especially before I was dairy-free and gluten-free, I just tasted stuff, and it was fine. And now I can't. And then COVID took some of my taste, so like I oversalt things. So if I ever make something from you and it's salty, that's why. My husband's like, lay off the salt. But God's given us the recipe, but we so often think we don't need to follow it to get the results. It doesn't work that way in God's economy. It doesn't really work that way real great with baking either most of the time, because we are not seasoned enough as Christians and never will to be able to do that. Only God can. So God gives us the recipe. It's up to us to follow the recipe, and He promises if we follow the recipe, the end result will be what He said it would be. God never lies, and He doesn't change. We're the ones that go rogue, you know, and decide to just, I think I had a Sunday school lesson on that. We just do what we want and think that we should get the results. You know, and it doesn't work that way with child rearing. It doesn't work that way with our own life as Christians. We have to follow the recipe. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. So 3 parts here. Because he trusteth in thee, if I trust in God, my mind will be on God. And if my mind is stayed on God, I'll be in perfect peace. Okay? But if I leave out one of these ingredients, I don't get the end result, which is the perfect peace. And who doesn't want perfect peace? You know, perfect peace is what I see my mom having. As she awaits test results, she's just like, I win either way. And I know some would say, oh, well, I'm sure she doesn't quite act that way in her. I actually think she does in the quiet moments of her own heart and stuff. I really, truly believe my mom really feels that way. And she's not putting on. She just really feels that way. I win either way. I trust him with my life. And I want to be like that. And I don't want to battle depression. And it's not, to be honest, like what I saw my husband, I haven't really experienced that. I do have some days where, you know, where I'm like thumbs down for sure, you know, and it's up to me to draw close to God, to follow the recipe, to think on the things that are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, and of good report, so that I won't be blue. I won't have the holiday blues. So don't feel bad if you are someone that battles with it, that battles with depression or the blues or whatever, or the thumbs down. Just understand you're not meant to park there. Don't park there. Do not let Satan get a victory in your life by parking there. No, you memorize Philippians 4:8, and that's what you think of when Satan brings into your mind, why is this happening to my daughter? Why us? You don't park there. you say, okay, I'm going to think of things that are true. Well, something that's true is Kylie is a child of God and she loves him. Think on something that's honest, is he will never leave her or forsake her. Just, God is always right. So see, you see this train of thought, things that are pure, is that he loves her with such a wholesome love. He's never going to do anything to her that would not be best for her. Things that are lovely. And that just makes me think of Kylie herself. You know, do you see how focusing on the things in this verse can totally change your line of thinking? And it can take it off here, and the hurt, when I'm focused inwardly, it can really hurt. And it's just like almost making the wound worse, and you know, and whereas if we go outward and upwardly, it changes the whole thought process. Not to say there'll never be any hurt there, but we can deal with things a lot better, a lot differently, a lot more Christ-like, and be better on the other side of it. Now we'll keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Keep your mind on Christ. That's the bottom line. Keep your mind on Christ. And he just makes everything else fall into place. All right? Thank you to our online friends for joining us.
Music is in the air, all the lights are on the tree, and love is everywhere. I hear a song of long ago about the Father, Son, and I love all the holidays